After years of preparation, commitment, and sacrifice, here we are. But the Church of Jesus has never been contained in a building or on a piece of land.
What's more important is the ministry that takes place inside this building.
The transformation that takes place in our hearts and minds, and what we do with it outside of this building.
We are the church, young and old, rich and poor, all facing the challenges of life together.
Each individually called and gifted to collectively fulfill the mission
of Jesus Christ.
So we're in a new building. Now what?
Well, good morning. Welcome to Connect Church. I'm Nate Rovenstine, lead pastor. Really glad you're here this morning. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about missions later in the sermon, so I want to definitely come back to that, and I'm grateful for Kerry as he gives leadership to that team. But the other thing that you've been talking about here at Connect Church is the longing that God has placed on the staff and the leadership board to see every generation in our church fully engaged with God and with each other. And hopefully, if you are on our email list, you received an email link this week, and I'm hoping that you took 5 to 10 minutes to fill that survey out. It's really important that we get as many of those possible done. We will send out another reminder this week, but if you can go back and find that email link and do that for us, we'd really appreciate it. Or if you would like to take 5 or 10 minutes after service, we have a couple of folks out here at the kiosks right by the Welcome Center that will help you with that survey and help us do that. We'd like those surveys to be finished by February 5th, so I think that's Tuesday or Wednesday of this week. This survey will help us gather needed data as we begin our journey of becoming a more and more intergenerational church. God's given us a unique partnership, as we talked about last week, with Fuller Youth Institute that will help us utilize the results of this survey to formulate a plan that will help us to become intergenerational. But I want to tell you this, and I want you to hear this clearly. We recognize, like when you go to the doctor as a believer, what do you do? You listen to the doctor, right? I mean, you wouldn't go if you didn't think they could help you. But you also pray. And when I pray for people, I pray that the doctor would have wisdom, but I also pray that the great physician would do supernatural healing. And so that's kind of what we're doing here. We're grateful for Fuller Youth Institute. We're grateful for their wisdom, their research, their knowledge. We're going to use it. They're our doctor. They're going to give us guidance. They may give us a prescription or two. But we know that if we're going to be an intergenerational church, where all generations are connecting with God and one another, that will be a supernatural work, right? We know that it's got to go beyond us just knowing some stuff and figuring out a plan, but there has to be a divine intervention. And so our long-range planning team will be meeting this week. We do this every year, and this kind of journey started a year ago with this intergenerational conversation. We're going to meet in this room right over here. You're not invited to that, but you are invited to pray. And we're going to just ask people that we have a group of people that pray on Sunday morning before this service. They're going to kind of spearhead this, and they're going to meet in the crossroom from 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock on Friday night, and from 9 o'clock to 1 o'clock on Saturday. So if you want to come and pray in that room while we're meeting in this room, we would invite you. We would love for you to do that. It's not written anywhere else. You're not going to get an email. So if you're interested in that, write it down. 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock on Friday night, 9 o'clock to 1 o'clock. I'd love to have somebody or one or two people at least the whole time we're meeting over here praying for us over there. All right, so that's just a little bit of a promo and a continuing conversation about this journey we're on as a church to figure out how to be more intergenerational. And in this journey, the last 3 weeks, we've been looking at some questions. 6 questions that everybody asks, every generation asks. Now, we found these questions in the context of the Fuller Youth Institute journey we're on. As they were guiding us and teaching us and training us last November, these 6 questions emerged in our work, and I went back and looked in the notes and found these 6 questions, but we've come to the conclusion that every generation is really asking these 6 questions. In the first week, we looked at the great existential question, who am I? Who am I? And we decided and looked at this idea that we want to be people who are grace-driven, not shame-driven. That when we discover who we are, it's because of who Christ has made us and who we are in Him, and that grace is way more powerful than us deciding we have to make something of ourselves, because there's always failure or pride. Neither one of those are good, and so we decided we wanted to be grace-driven, not shame-driven people. And then the question we looked at last week was, where do I fit in? What group do I belong to? You know, remember the "Are you my mother?" Like, where is home for me? Where are my people? Where do I fit? And we decided that love is greater than acceptance, that to be loved is greater than to be accepted, because so often we tie those two together, that I will love you when I can accept at least enough of you that I can tolerate you, right? So we get in groups, and these are my people, those are your people, and we decided that really love is a greater good, because love decides to love. Love loves even when we can't be empathetic. We can love somebody even when we can't understand them. We can love somebody even when we disagree with them. And this love is not from us. Remember last week we said we know and rely on God's love from 1 John. So we know and rely on the love that God has for us. This is the foundation of that love. So this morning we're gonna tackle another question. But before we do, I want to just read something, and I'm going to kind of just read this. So forgive me that I'm not having eye contact here. This is from a blog by Joseph Sunday, and this is not a Christian perspective. This isn't something that was written for the church, but I found it very interesting. And here's his blog. He says, Americans love to say things like, follow your passion, pursue your dreams, or do what you love and love what you do. But do these mantras truly represent the path to vocational clarity, personal fulfillment, and human flourishing? Not according, Joseph says, not according to a new study by researchers from Stanford University, which found that, quote, following your passion is likely to lead to, listen to this, to overly limited pursuits, inflated expectations, and early or eventual burnout. The authors of the study concluded that people are often told to find their passions as though passions and interests are preformed and must simply be discovered. This idea, however, has hidden motivational implications. Urging people to find their passion may lead them to put all their eggs in one basket, but then to drop that basket when it becomes difficult to carry. Although our culture tells us to look within, assuming a fixed set of passions to guide us on our way, remember, this is not written from a Christian perspective, researchers found more positive results among those who allow room for interests and intelligence to develop over time. The study encourages us to ask, are we still looking only to the self, or are we looking outward and upward as well? As David Brooks says, most successful young people don't look inside and plan their life. Here's the key phrase. They look outside and find a calling which summons their life. That's very interesting, isn't it? That the secular research understands that if we're really going to find something in life that's greater than us, we don't look inside of ourselves for our passions, but we look outside of ourselves for our calling. The blogger gets to another fundamental question that we all face, and that is, what difference do I make? What's my purpose on this planet? Why am I here? What is it that I'm, now, not who am I and those sort of existential questions, or what's my group, where do I fit in, but like, what am I supposed to do? Why am I here? What is my purpose? And again, David Brooks, the research says, successful people are called to something greater than simply following their passions. And I want to make a case this morning that Jesus has a mission, that Jesus has an answer to that question. And it works for everybody. Like, it's not like I'm going to give you what Jesus says about this mission, this desire to fit it, or this desire to know our purpose. And I'm going to tell you that there will be a personalized version of it for you that I'm not going to go around and tell you all what it is, but it'll be the same for all of us. And Jesus gave us this mission, this answer to this question, this mission for all of us. He gave it in the first line of the prayer that we often pray and that we're going to end the service with this morning. When he said, "Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name." And then here's your mission, this next line. Your kingdom come. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. There's our mission. Our mission is to fully embrace and allow room for God's kingdom in our life. Our mission is to fully embrace God's kingdom in our life. Now, I have nothing against passions. I have several passions in my life, several things that I love to do, and I am not giving those up, nor should you give up your passions. One of the things that I am very passionate about in my own personal life, and I know you're thinking, Kansas City Royals or running. Let me tell you something, is travel. My wife and I love to travel. We love it so much that we make decisions, days and weeks and months and years ahead so that we can travel. It's like we say no to some things so we can say yes to this. And we like to travel, to Salina, Kansas, and visit some museum on the way. We like to travel the back roads of Kansas. We like to travel around the world. We like to travel. In fact, sometimes when we're on one trip, we're planning our next trip because there's not a whole lot. We like to travel, but we really don't like driving down I-70 a whole lot. It's kind of boring. So, look, this is literally true. Sometimes we'll go out to see our daughter in Denver, and we're like, okay, let's plan our next trip. We like to travel so much that we brought our kids into this journey. We had a goal. When our kids were really little, we said, we want to have our children go to all 48 states. Alaska and Hawaii are on their own. They can figure that out themselves. But we're going to get them in all 48 states, the contiguous, did I say that right? United States. So we made that a goal. And we planned trips. And we, made excuses to go visit people in all these places. And it's helpful when you have family that lives all across the United States. We love this so much. We were so passionate about this that when we went out to see my brother who lives in Virginia or in the D.C. area, and he went to Naval Academy in Annapolis. So one day we drove from where he lived on one side of D.C. all the way up towards Baltimore and into Annapolis. If you're familiar with that area, we covered a lot of ground and a lot of traffic. It was during Thanksgiving weekend. So we get to Annapolis. We tour Annapolis, which was fun. My girls had never been there. I'd been there. It was cool to say this is where Uncle Mick went to school at the Naval Academy. And then we got looking at a map. We said, we're not that far from Delaware. We haven't been to Delaware. I don't think we'll ever want to come back to go to Delaware. I mean, what's in Delaware that we would ever want to come back for? I said, there were two cars. We were with a bunch of families. So I said, one of the cars going to Delaware. My 3 girls are going to be in it. Anybody want to join us? So we drove to Delaware, added 2 hours to our trip. We saw the Delaware state line. We drove into the first driveway that was in Delaware, and we turned around and went home. 2 hours to mark it off our box. We have a passion for travel. Unfortunately, we made it with all of our girls, except our middle daughter never made it to Michigan. So, and of all the daughters that listen to my sermons, Jamie, I'm still sorry about that. It's ironic that her husband grew up in Michigan, but she's never been back. That's kind of on you, Jake, if you happen to hear this. We love travel. It's a passion. But at the end of the day, it never fully, truly satisfies. It's fun. It's good. It's healthy to have passions. But we know, right, that at the end of the day, there's still something that's not quite filled. There's a deeper hole in our heart. It's a false narrative that if you find your passion, you will find complete fulfillment. I love that word, false narrative. Let me say it like it really is. It's a lie. The better story is that if you lose yourself in God's mission, you will find your calling. That's a better story. And that's what Jesus said. Jesus said, whoever finds their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. I think if we were to put that verse in the context of what we're saying this morning, Jesus would say, whoever finds their passion It's the ultimate source of their being. If they find it, they're going to lose it. They're going to put all their eggs in that one basket, and it's going to be too heavy to carry. And the idea there is that it's just, as good as it is, it's not enough to meet my deepest needs. But Jesus says, if you'll lose your life for my sake, you will find it. So really the key idea this morning is that mission is greater than passion. And passion's good, right? But mission is greater than passion. Or again, as Jesus said in his prayer, our Father who art in heaven, or who is in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. But here's the catch, and you know it, right? You know what this means, right? I don't have to say this. Here's the catch. If we're really praying for God's kingdom to come, that means our kingdom has to die. There's no room for two kingdoms, kind of by definition. That's the rub. And unfortunately, it's so easy for us to invite Jesus to bless our kingdom. Yes, my calling is for Jesus to bless my kingdom, to bless what I want to do. Or as David Platt says, we are settling for a Christianity that revolves around catering to ourselves when the central message of Christianity is about abandoning ourselves. It's throughout Scripture. Jesus said it over and over again in so many ways. Some subtle, some quite direct when he talks about taking up your cross and following me. That Christianity is not about catering to ourselves, but it's about abandoning ourselves to him so that his life can fill ours. You know, there's a lot that's changed from the time that we had little babies until I had little grandbabies, especially in the area of car seats. When we picked up Weston, and we had the privilege of being there when he came home from the hospital, I'm telling you, my daughter was the car seat Nazi. We put him in a car seat. We buckled him. Remember you had those straps you put through, kind of just through, you took the strap and you folded it out and you just stuck it through there and it was just kind of put. Not now. They anchor these things to the frame. Have you not done? I mean, it's like you got to reach down there between the seats and you got to find that little hook that they put in there. And then, then you put it in backwards and they're in there backwards till they're 12. And then here's how it's going to work. About the time they're out of their car seats, they're ready to drive the car. That's where we're headed with all of this. And my little grandson, Weston's 2.5. He's still facing backwards. Like I can't see him when I'm driving. I talk to him. And I get it. It's dangerous out there on the roads. And it's scary for first-time parents. And I'm not if you're all putting your kids in those kinds of car seats, that's awesome. You're doing the right thing as parents. It's scary, though, isn't it? And I remember I watched my son-in-law and daughter put little Weston in the car for the first time and drive him home, and you get to see the excitement and the fear, like, get it, and then you got it to 2 fingers, and they would show me how to do it. Like, I don't care. You put them in. I'm not ever going to do this again. You do it in 2 fingers, and it's got to be right here, and it's scary. You want to protect them. But parents, if you're in that situation, I'm going to tell you something that's way more scary. Way more scary. It's when you sit in the passenger seat and you hand them the keys and you go test drive for the first time. Especially if they have a clutch. My kids still tell stories about how I took them out the first, especially Chelsea, poor oldest daughter. She had all the things that happened that in my insecurities. By the third one, I was like, just go drive. You're fine. But man, that first time that you're sitting in the passenger seat and you're trusting somebody else to drive. John Ortberg says this. Again, I'm going to read. It's a big moment in my life when I hand someone else the keys. Up until now, I've been driving. I choose the destination. I choose the route. I choose the speed. I'm in the driver's seat. And you're in the drive-along seat. But if we are to change seats, if you're going to drive, I have to trust you. It's all about control. Whoever is in this seat is the person in control. A lot of people find Jesus handy to have in the car as long as he's in the ride-along seat. Because something may come up when they require his services. I Jesus, have a health problem and I need some help. I'm glad you're in the car. I want you in the car, but I'm not sure I want you driving. Because if Jesus is driving, I'm not in charge of my life anymore. If he's driving, I'm not in charge of my wallet anymore. If I put him in control, then it's no longer a matter of giving some money now and then when I have an abundance. Now it's his wallet. That's scary. If Jesus is driving, I'm not in charge of my ego anymore. I no longer have the right to satisfy every self-centered ambition. No, it's his agenda. It's his life. Now I'm not in charge of my mouth anymore. I don't get to gossip, flatter, cajole, deceive, rage, intimidate, manipulate, exaggerate. I get out of the driver's seat and hand the keys over to him. But I'm more alive than ever because it's not my life anymore, it's his. It's scary to let Jesus drive, and it requires trust. But if we are to find our mission, we have to let him drive the car. It's kind of interesting. We're talking about mission, and this is Missions Month. And as we think about the idea of missions, most of us immediately think of missionaries that we're talking about. The people that go out sort of full-time or mostly full-time and have a mission that they do somewhere. And we should think of that. That's definitely part of it. But I want to make a case this morning that we are all on mission. We are on the mission of expanding his kingdom in our heart, in our families, at our workplace, in our church, in our neighborhoods, in our communities. And as Ben said, his kingdom is already here. So our mission is to find a way to expand his kingdom in our environments. To step out of the way, to step out of the driver's seat and say, Lord, how can you use me to expand your mission in the context where you have placed me? I also think it's our responsibility to expand the mission of the church. That it's not just about me figuring out how to expand my mission in my circle, but what is he calling me to do in regards to the greater mission of the church? And as I was kind of thinking about how to sort of wrap these two ideas together of sort of Missions Month and this idea of losing ourselves in God's kingdom, I read early this week an article written by Dr. Wayne Schmidt, who is the leader of our denomination. And he said there are 3 key words with 3 key passages in the book of Acts that help us understand the mission that God has placed us in. And the first word is power. Power. That this mission that we are on requires God's power. And that's the promise that Jesus made as he was leaving this earth, and he was saying, go wait for the Holy Spirit to come. And as he said that, he said, when the Holy Spirit comes, you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you. And you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. So as Jesus left this planet, he said, here's your mission. Your mission is to take this message to Jerusalem, those people around you that are like you, to Judea, those people that are like you but not necessarily around you, your nation, Samaria, those people that are around you but are not like you at all, crossing cultural, racial, financial barriers, whatever they might be. This is your mission then to take this to the ends of the earth. And he said, you'll need power to do this. You can't do this yourself, but I'm promising to send power. You know, I often hear when we talk about global missions, people say, why are we sending people there when there are so many needs here? Why are we sending money there when there are so many needs here? Why are we asking people to go be evangelists there when there are so many people that don't know Jesus here? And I say, because of this verse. Because that's what Jesus said to do. It's not an either or, it's a both and. I get so frustrated. We live in an either or world right now. You're either on this team or that team. You either vote this way or that way. This is a both and situation that we are called to go to the ends of the earth with this message, even as we are neighboring well with our Jerusalem. We are all on this mission. And his promise is he will give his power. But this power is for a purpose. Kevin Myers says, God gives his power for his purposes. He does not give his power for my purposes. And he does not expect me to fulfill his purposes in my power. Let me tell you something. If you are on mission, if you embrace this idea that what I'm doing, where I'm placed, what I'm gifted in is for the advancement of the kingdom, he will empower you to do it. If you embrace the idea that I want to be a part of the missions around the world, the idea of spreading this to the ends of the earth, I don't know what that looks like for me. He will give you the power to do it. He will give you the resources to do it. That's why we have community partnerships, because we want to give you entry points into this idea of spreading the gospel here in Douglas County and in Wyandotte County. That's why we have these 5 community partners, so that you have a place where you can, New York School, you can be a reading buddy, you can be on mission specifically there. That's why we have global partnerships. And there's a table, as has been alluded to out here, and we support these missionaries that are all around the world because we are partnering with them, and we believe that we are a team with them, and we want God's power to expand the kingdom. So the first word is power, Acts 1:8. The second word is pressure. Because here's why. Apparently, the power wasn't enough. The power came in Acts chapter 2. But notice what happens in Acts chapter 8, verse 1. It's kind of interesting. It's the mirror image of Acts 1:8. But in Acts 8:1, on that day a great persecution broke out against the church in Jerusalem, and all except the apostles were scattered throughout Judea and Samaria. There was pressure. Apparently, the power wasn't enough. Apparently, something had to happen. And God said, if this kingdom is going to expand, there has to be pressure against those who will get into a comfort zone. And this great persecution broke out. We haven't seen persecution in America in my lifetime. We may or may not see it in my lifetime. But I can tell you what, there's pressure, and there's pain, and there's problems. And I want to tell you that those things are not things to avoid. Those things are not to say, why doesn't God love me if this is going on in my life? Those things are to say, what is this pressure? What is this pain teaching me? And how is it pushing me deeper into the mission of expanding God's kingdom? That's how we should think about the pain in our life. Not how do I get around it? How do I avoid it? But what is this showing me about how this is pushing me out of my Jerusalem into unfamiliar territory? How is this persecution or this pain or this pressure teaching me something different? The idea of the wounded healer, right? The idea that those of us who have gone through stuff can help those who are going through stuff. This can be an avenue for mission. The power of God, the pressure of life, and then the power of prayer. That's the third word, is prayer. You want to know when your prayers are being answered? When your life gets uncomfortable. When you want to know when your prayer that God's kingdom would expand is when your life begins to be uncomfortable, because what God is doing is saying, I'm pushing you into uncomfortable things. I'm challenging the assumptions in your life. I'm challenging the kingdom that you have set up. That's what happened to Peter. Peter had established a relationship with Jesus. He was one of the main disciples. We know Peter's one of the inner 3 of Jesus' circle, and yet he still had a wrong idea about the kingdom. He thought the kingdom was only for the Jewish people. And God, through prayer, changed his mind. And I won't go into the whole context, but in Acts chapter 10, through a prayer and through a vision, Peter said to God, surely not I, Lord. Peter replied, surely not, Lord, Peter replied. In other words, I'm not going to eat this food that's laid before me because it doesn't fit our dietary laws. I have never eaten anything impure or unclean. The voice spoke to him a second time. Do not call anything impure that God has made clean. There's a whole story there, but mainly what you need to understand for this point is, in prayer, God changed Peter's assumption about what God's kingdom was. And if you want to lose yourself in God's mission, you and I need to be people of prayer who surrender to what God is calling us to. And if your prayers never challenge the assumptions you've created about your life, my prayer is that you're not praying, let your kingdom come. Because in my experience, when God's kingdom comes, Nate's kingdom gets unsettled pretty quick. This mission will require you to get involved. It will require you to begin to have a heart for missionaries, to pray for them. to connect with them, to get to know them through the avenues, whether there are missionaries here at Connect Church, and to give to their advancement of the kingdom and this great call, maybe even to go. Maybe God is speaking to somebody here today. As Carrie said, we want our church to be a place where people are saying, where God is saying, it's time for you to go. And maybe as you even enter into the early retirement years, or as you're starting a career, God is calling you to something different than what you had planned. Prayer changes our lives. One of the great leaders in the church that many of you don't know about, but has influenced hundreds of thousands of pastors, including me, is John Stott. John Stott is the rector of All Souls London in Langham Place, All Souls Langham Place in London. He was a great preacher, a Bible teacher, an evangelist, an author, a global leader, and a friend to many. And John Stott wrote a book called Between Two Worlds, which has laid the foundation for my preaching for the last 35 years. Os Guinness, another great man of God, visited John Stott as he was about to die. John Stott was on his deathbed, and Oz said that he went into his room and they shared stories and they talked about the life they had shared together. They laughed a little bit, they cried a little bit. And then John realized that his days were about over. Oz said to John Stott, I asked him how he would like me to pray for him. And here's what he said. Lying weakly on his back and barely able to speak, John Stott answered in a whisper, pray that I will be faithful to Jesus until my last breath. I'm thinking, dude, you're almost there already. But still, in that moment, his greatest desire is that God would help him to be faithful to the kingdom. That's how I want to live my life, folks. Not that I've got it figured out, but that you would pray for me and that I would pray for you, that we would be faithful to Jesus until our very last breath. That we would be faithful to letting his kingdom trump and destroy our kingdom. That we would lose ourselves in his mission that he laid out in Acts 1:8. That we would take the gospel to Jerusalem across the street, Judea around the state, Samaria across cross-cultural lines, and to the ends of the world, wherever that might take us. God, may we be faithful to the advancement of your kingdom. Let your kingdom come, and let your will be done. Stand with the worship team and let's sing this song which affirms the advancement of God's kingdom.